I never liked the Fender Jazzmaster or the Jaguar. Too much chrome, too many knobs, too many switches, too twangy, and too fiddly. I didn't even like the offset body style. Besides, none of the guitar players I grew up listening to used offset Fenders, with the exception of the Ventures, who later ditched them for Moss rights. Over the years, I've had occasion to play a few Jazzmasters, and they always disappointed me. Too thin and too skinny sounding. Good for surf music and Beach Boys maybe, but I always gravitated to blues and rock, and that was more the realm of Strats and Tellys. So here I am 55 years later, and I've got a new Fender Player II Jazzmaster. How does a hater come around to buying a guitar he doesn't really like? Maybe it's time to take another look and see if I might change my mind about offsets. Bear in mind, I'm giving you my take on the Fender Player II Jazzmaster from a guy who has never owned an offset and has no reference to any other Jazzmasters. So if I say some stupid stuff, please understand up front, I'm not a Jazzmaster expert. I'm new to the offset world, and this review is from an inexperienced novice perspective. Let me start off by saying I have warmed up to the offset body style over the years. Especially now that Fender's upgraded the Player II series and added some cool colors like this aquatone blue, all for $829. The first thing that appeals to me is less gadgets. Fender has stripped the electronics down to 2 knobs and a switch and eliminated all those fiddly doohickeys on it. I've heard some people complain that there's no rhythm circuit and the Player II is not true to the Jazzmaster heritage. Even worse, it's not routed under the pickguard for an option to add it on. Frankly, I'm glad Fender decided to ditch all those roller knobs and switches. Less stuff for me to break and rip my fingers on. I like simple electronics like a Strat or a Tele. Volume, tone, and a pickup switch, that's all I need. And no witch hat knobs. Thank you. So one of the big selling points for me is the rosewood fretboard. For a while now, rosewood has only been available on higher end Fenders and usually out of my price range. But now rosewood's back, and that's a big plus for me. I like the way rosewood looks, I like the way it feels, and this is a thicker slab rosewood fretboard, so I like it even better. The next improvement on the Player II series is the rolled fretboard edges. Who doesn't want a guitar that plays smoother? No fret ends jutting out and ripping up your hands as you slide up and down the neck. That's a nice improvement, and I will say that along with the satin finish on the back of the neck, it does feel smoother. Thank you, Fender, for listening to your customers and making the improvements, but it still feels like it needs a little more smoothing. And I noticed that the ends of the nut on my guitar were sharp and needed a bit more finish work too. And there's other things that always bug me about the Jazzmaster, like the floating bridge and trem system. I definitely prefer the Strat and the Tele bridge that anchors down to the body and puts a hard angle on the strings. Well, apparently Fender listened to their customers and moved the trem closer to the bridge for more break angle and replaced the fiddly bridge with a simpler, sturdy Mustang bridge. If you've got a heavy touch like me and tend to drive your strumming hand down hard on the attack, this setup is an improvement. And so far, it's stayed in place even with my heavy-handed touch. One other difference in the trem is there's no lock-off switch to disengage the trem. This is easy enough to change out with a different tremolo. Okay, now let's get to the good stuff, the pickups and the sound. I understand the idea originally for the Jazzmaster pickups was a wider magnetic field to produce a more complex and interesting sound. The downside of this is I think the wider field produces a less focused sound and can sometimes sound thin. I'm not a Jazzmaster expert, so I don't know how these Player II pickups stack up against others, but I can compare them to a Stratocaster. The bridge pickup has got loads of ear-splitting treble. It's pretty close to a Tele, and that's saying a lot. I have to dial back the tone knob a bit for my taste on the bridge pickup. The neck pickup is a little woofy to me, and with any kind of gain, it gets a little muddy. But it's interesting to note that listening back to the sound samples, the Jazzmaster neck pickup sounds brighter than the Stratocaster neck pickup. The middle position, to me, is the weirdest. It's not like the middle position on a Tele, which I'm a big fan of. It's got a wider, more scoop sound, and I'm still trying to dial it in. The middle position is noise canceling, which is a nice feature. The Jazzmaster is never going to sound like a Strat or a Tele, but what a Jazzmaster does give you is another color in your sound palette. By the way, as a side note, the pickup cavities are covered in shielding paint, and the back of the pickguard has a foil coating which helps quiet down the single coil pickups. And these pickups have got a lot of gain and can get gnarly if you need it. The resistance reading on the neck is 6.67K and the bridge is 7.91. As a reference, the Fender Pure Vintage 65 pickups are 6.8K on both neck and the bridge. So the player pickups are hotter than the Pure Vintage 65s. Here's some sound samples with a Stratocaster for comparison. The Player series has always been aligned more with modern features like a slightly flatter 9.5-inch radius, modern C-shaped satin finish neck with 22 medium jumbo frets. But now the Player II series has added some vintage details that cross over into the Vintera series, like the vintage tuners, which I think look great and operate better. The hole in the top of the tuners makes it faster and easier to change strings. Just measure 2 posts away and cut the string, pop the end of the string in the top of the hole and wind it up. It doesn't slip, and it's fast and easy. The vintage look is also reflected in the aged pickup covers, knobs, and plastics, and also the vintage tint on the neck. I'm not a purist, so anything that improves the function and playability of the guitar, I'm all in. So here's my thoughts on the Fender Player II Jazzmaster from a guy who has never owned an offset guitar. First, let me tell you what I like about the guitar. I love the look. I've come around to the offset body style, and I think it's a great looking guitar, especially in the new colors like this aquatone blue. Next, it's probably the most comfortable sitting down playing guitar that Fender's ever made. The shape just fits very comfortably in your lap, and it feels great to play. Keep in mind that the Jazzmaster is bigger than the Telecaster or the Strat. It's longer and wider, so it won't fit into a standard Strat case. And the Player II Jazzmaster does not come with any case, not even a gig bag. And the added girth of the body on the Jazzmaster is usually heavier. Mine is 7 pounds 13 ounces, and I have not seen any lighter than that. The body wood is alder, but take a look at the route on the body on this guitar. That doesn't look like alder to me. Alder is usually a light-colored wood. This looks more like mahogany. Maybe it's just this particular body, and this is an unusual piece of alder, but something's up. I do love the simplicity of the stripped-down controls. 2 knobs and a switch is all I need. In the past, too many doodads and chrome turned me off to this guitar, so without all that jazz, I like it much better. What else? I like this particular guitar acoustically. Some guitars, I feel like they fight you. It seems like you have to work harder to get the sound out of some guitars. This Jazzmaster rings nicely acoustically, and strumming across the strings, the sound is very even and in tune. It's not the loudest acoustically, but sonically it rings out nicely. Now for what I'm not that crazy about. My biggest challenge is I'm still struggling with the sound. It makes sense to me that Leo Fender was constantly trying to improve his products, and it seems like the Jazzmaster was an attempt to upgrade the sound quality by making an improved sounding pickup. If a better pickup means less coloration and a truer representation of the string vibration, then the designers at Fender accomplished this with the Jazzmaster. Think about this as if you wanted to design a better sounding microphone. The first order of business would be better fidelity and a flatter response across the bandwidth. But in the guitar world, fidelity does not necessarily translate to a better sound. Old lo-fi amps sound wonderful. Like when Graham invented the telephone, he focused on the frequency response where the human voice was the strongest. The Stratocaster pickups overall sound more focused in the mids, where the guitar is more pronounced and punches through the mix. The Jazzmaster pickups, in comparison, I would say are more hi-fi sounding and even across the bandwidth. But the net effect is, it comes off sounding a little strident or piercing. Yeah, I know, that's why we have a tone control and lots of pedals to tailor the sound to whatever you're looking for. But for me, I'm still trying to figure out how to get the best sound out of the Jazzmaster. Then I come back to the fidgety things on the Jazzmaster, like the bridge and the tremolo. The problems with the Jazzmaster bridge are well documented, and there's lots of options for replacement. Let's face it, the design is just not that good. Any bridge that's designed to move around is not a good idea in my humble opinion. The Stratocaster and the Telecaster strings are anchored to the body directly through a solid piece of metal screwed down to the body. This design allows more string vibration to transfer directly to the body. And here's another thing that's kind of odd on the Jazzmaster. When I play the area above the 12th fret on the Jazzmaster, I hear sympathetic vibrations. The strings from the harp behind the bridge resonate as you play and introduce other vibrations to the sound. In addition, the floating bridge is designed to move around as you use the tremolo, so how can you ever get the intonation right? I know there's guys that really use the behind the bridge strings to come up with some really creative and interesting sounds, but I guess I'm not that creative and I'm not a fan. Finally, I've had a hard time keeping the Jazzmaster in tune, and it seems to me it's probably the tremolo system. Maybe I just don't know how to set it up properly, but so far I don't like the design of the Jazzmaster tremolo as much as the Stratocaster. So there you have it. The Player II series replaces the previous generation with some nice upgrades and a good bang for your buck. If you thought you'd have to spend big bucks on a Fender with a rosewood neck, you'll be pleased to know that rosewood is available on the Made in Mexico Player II at $829, which I think is a great price point for this kind of quality. So have I become an offset enthusiast? Not quite. For me, the Jazzmaster is still a third guitar. My first guitars are Strats and Tellies, my second guitars are Les Pauls, and my third guitars are all the rest. The third guitars have a sound that's a little different, and when I'm looking for some variety, I'll grab a third guitar. The Revstar, the Squires, the Gretsch, the Ibanez, and now my Jazzmaster all have that slightly different flavor to spice up the mix. And a different sound can often inspire an idea that you'd never come up with on your first or second guitars. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and leave me a comment. I read all the comments, and as always, I enjoy hearing what you guys have to say. Till next time, share the fun, get together with friends, and play music together.